Well, Graham, thank you for joining us today. You've come along to talk about the new game that you're working on, which is 0200 Hours.
That's right.
I mean, I know a little bit about it, but it's still kind of in early to mid-development. So do you want to give us an overview of how you got to making this game in the first place and what your goals were?
Ooh, I guess I was, after Test of Honour, had various different ideas of kind of the follow-up, I guess. And the one that rose to the top was this idea of doing a kind of a raiding game, so commandos, SAS, airborne troops in World War II, doing sneaky raids where you're creeping into the enemy encampments, trying to do silent takedowns, and I think I quite had in my head a lot of computer games I've played where you kind of do that and then everything goes wrong and a big firefight breaks out, and you either win or you have to run away.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the shape of a game that I had in my head.
Right. Yeah, I mean, with video games, it's obviously the stealth genre is quite a popular one, but one that is often either really successful on odd occasions or doesn't really work very well. And I think the same's kind of true with tabletop games as well. It seems to be a genre that's quite hard to pull off right. What video games did you kind of look to for that? Was it stuff like Commandos and things like that?
Well, it wasn't specifically World War II that I'd played. I played things like, right now I'm playing Cyberpunk, and we got quite a lot of sci-fi games actually.
Sure.
But just have that kind of vibe, those kind of mechanics, where you're sneaking into things and the guards kind of get suspicious if they hear you and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because you've got alert levels in the game that you're making, right? Is that kind of a response to that? And also there's a bit of a fog of war kind of thing going on?
Yes, so because it's specifically about night battles, so the default assumption is that you can't see anyone else. So you start the game, you can't see the other people at all, even if you might have kind of a line of sight physically.
Sure.
You still have to either hear them because they've messed up a bit, or actively spot them before you're allowed to shoot them. And once you've heard something, then the sentries will start to zone in on you and start to move towards you. And once they actually kind of get close enough, the alert level's going to climb, and the alarm will go off, and all hell will break loose, and everyone will start shooting. So obviously the attackers are trying to hold that moment off for as long as they can, and try and do sneaky takedowns. And they'll have to hide the bodies probably because the sentries will be patrolling around on their patrol routes.
Yeah.
And it's very much, again, I suppose like Test of Honour, lots of inspiration from old World War II films, but just not necessarily 100% realistic stuff.
No, a bit pulpy maybe at the same time.
A bit pulpy, Guns of Navarone and Where Eagles Dare, all this kind of stuff. I'm determined to get in kind of attackers dressed up in German uniforms, just all those kind of fantastic kind of movie references that just are going to be really fun. Poured into this one cool game.
Cool. I mean, it sounds like you've got a lot of ideas and you've put a lot of systems together to make them work, I imagine. What's your process for that? Like, do you start with a big list of these are my ideals and then start whittling it down and working out what's actually going to be feasible?
Yeah. I literally start by jotting down all those cool things that would be cool to happen in the game.
Yeah.
So all the stuff I've mentioned, guard dogs, setting timed explosives and distraction, throwing a rock to distract the guards, and just everything like that. then the next step, I guess, would be to start working out a core mechanic. So first of all, you've got the kind of spotting thing, the being alerted to someone's presence idea. So so you've got that, and that's triggered by the dice. So right from the start, I wanted the idea that the more you did, whether that was running around or shooting or whatever action you're taking, you're more likely to set off and alert the guards. So every action, including movement, you're rolling dice, and if you roll the wrong result, then that's going to trigger an alert.
Because you've got different coloured dice for like
yes.
noisy and quiet actions
yes.
as well, right?
It quickly became clear to me that some some kind of sneaking along quietly compared to shooting a Sten gun was a very, very different thing, and it was too far apart from each other to really work with that exactly the same dice mechanic. So I ended up with one type of dice which can give you away if you're doing particularly noisy things or lots of action, and the second type of dice which can help you be quiet and actually cancels those alerts. So if you're doing something very quiet, you might occasionally just roll those quiet dice. Usually it's a mix of the two, and if you're shooting a heavy machine gun, then it's going to be just lots of those loud dice, which is clearly going to give you away. So how it works in practice is a kind of standard roll will be one of each of those dice. So you've usually got the chance of giving yourself away, but also a chance of hiding again and kind of disappearing into the darkness if you get lucky.
Sure.
So that kind of dice mechanic came fairly quickly. The hardest bit has been working out the movement.
Is that because of the fog of war, like hidden movement and things like that?
Yes, it's trying to get to a point where the sentries are patrolling round. So you have a kind of set patrol route that you kind of work out at the beginning of the game. And it's getting to a point where the sentries kind of are looking for you, and if they've heard you, they might move towards you. But equally, the attackers need to have a chance to do those silent takedowns, which are so iconic.
Yeah.
So it's a balance between the sentries moving close enough to you that you can do that, but not just going and finding you straight away. So there's various mechanics which allow you to have, particularly for the defenders, to have some control over where they're moving, but not complete control. So they might not be going as fast as you want, or they might not quite go in the direction that you want.
Sure. So it's essentially like the attacker has full agency over their models from the start, whereas the defender, to some extent, they determine what they do, and then there's a point where things escalate and suddenly they gain that control as the alerts raise.
Yeah, pretty much, yes. Yeah, that's how it works.
Are there vision cones that, like, do models have a viewing arc and things like that?
No,
I
haven't gone that far, because that's often cropped up in computer games, isn't it? But, it's a tricky balance I'm finding about keeping a game that's simple enough to be easy to pick up and easy to learn, and at the same time having that whole extra element of stealth, without making it a super complicated simulation style game. I wanted it still to be fun, quick, easy to learn thing, which was what's made Test of Honor so popular and quick to pick up for people.
Sure.
Like it's got a very simple core mechanic, and then you kind of understand the complications of it later with cards and extra levels. So yeah, it was a lot of slog and play test to get to that point where the core is quick and easy and intuitive. I think that's the key word.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I think of, like, obviously I'm not a game designer, but thinking about this, like the difficulty for me that seems to be the most prominent one is people are supposed to be moving whilst hidden, yet you both are looking like God down on the table. So absolutely. How is making the defender, is removing that control initially from the defender to counter that and mean that the defending player can't just see, oh, well, there's a guy there, so I'm going to move right over there to counter.
Yeah, exactly. Essentially, until someone's all given themselves away, you can't just move directly towards them. So they'll start with, they'll either be going around their patrol route, or they'll be reasonably random movement. So the dice have got use like chevron marks, like a sergeant's stripes.
Yeah.
When the different number of chevrons is used in the stats and how successful you are, but it also gives us a nice directional arrow which we can use. So you tend to roll so many dice. You can choose one of the directions the arrow's pointing, but if those arrows happen to be pointing the wrong way, then you're stuffed and your sentry's going the wrong way. So you have an element of control, a bit of choice, but not full choice.
Yeah, no, that sounds really cool.
Unless that attacker has given himself away, in which case you'll be able to go and search him out.
Yeah. So is it a combined alert level, like, or can an individual model make themselves apparent to part of the tabletop?
There's an overall alert level for the defenders, who go through kind of calm and then suspicious and then the alarm's raised.
Yeah.
But the individual models will give themselves away individually, as in that particular guy has stepped on a twig and made too much noise, or stuck his head out too far to try and spot the other guys. So that individual guy will get a marker to show he's given himself away, and that will follow him around unless he manages to hide again.
Oh, that sounds good. So the alert level can obviously drop as well still if the attacker then takes care all over again.
Yeah. So you can go from calm to suspicious and then back down again if they do very well and go everyone freeze. Obviously, once the alarm's been raised, then that's it.
Yeah. Is it possible that as an attacker you could be incredibly careful and incredibly smart and actually complete whatever your mission is and never raise to that alert level?
Well, I guess in theory, the dice could allow you to do that. It's hardly ever going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of balancing the scenarios, which I haven't done yet. Because in my head, the ideal game is you sneak for a bit, you manage to take out a few guards, but then they get suspicious and the alarm's been raised and there's a firefight to end the game. And if you've done well enough at the beginning, then you might win that firefight. Sure. If you haven't done well enough, then you'll probably be driven back. And
yes. So it's almost, it sounds a bit like the dice are almost like the random factor becomes a bit of a circuit breaker to ensure that most games don't end with complete stealth winning the day.
Yeah, that would be really unlikely, I think.
No, that's cool. And the dice, it seems, they serve multiple purposes within just a single roll as well. You know, they're addressing different areas of game design. Is that something that you kind of brought in intentionally, or was that just something that happened over time?
I do quite like those kind of special dice which help bring out the story. What we've got is some of the dice faces are telling you how successful you've been on whatever you're trying to do, whether you've hit with your gun and stuff like that, or how fast you're running, things like that. You've also got the alerts, whether you've been too noisy and been spotted, or whether you've been nice and stealthy and managed to be really quiet. And then there's a third symbol, which is a medal, which is used to do kind of auxiliary things, an extra, do something particularly well, and that allows me to add lots more little complexity and actions in, which don't clutter up the core mechanic.
Sure. Does that affect different models in different ways then? Is it like a certain troop type will respond?
For example, if you're firing a Sten gun, then getting a medal might give you a bonus. If you're shooting at lots of people, it gives you a spread effect.
Yeah.
If you're ducking out of the way of an enemy shot, then getting the medal might allow you to dive into cover.
Yeah.
So it triggers lots of different things depending on the action or a particular car, or even a piece of equipment that you might happen to have.
Right. And do the defender uses the same dice as the attacker, but just they serve a different purpose to some extent?
On the whole, they'll have the same actions. The attacker will still have to spot the defenders, because equally they're in the dark as well, unless they happen to be standing next to a light. So the attackers have a sneak action, which is only for them. The defenders aren't going to be sneaking around, and the defenders have a patrol action, which is only for them. But everything else is kind of the same for everybody.
Right. Have you had to kind of break away from like the I go, you go kind of conventions because of some of the almost AI routines that the defenders are taking?
Yes, to an extent. So, and again, this was part of working out that movement thing that I was talking about. What I've ended up with is that when the defenders are calm near the beginning of the game, then when you activate a sentry, you have to activate two. You have to activate three at once.
Right.
And then when they're suspicious, it's just two at once, and then once the alarm's gone off, it's just normal. And what effect that has is that the sentries tend to go before the attackers and use up their actions, so they're vulnerable to those takedowns.
Right, that's cool.
Otherwise, you just kept, until I came up with that, I just kept coming up with the attackers. I need to go, but the attacker hasn't moved towards into range yet, but you're trying to stay stealthy, so you don't want to move, and so that came out as quite a nice, simple solution, which puts the sentries into dicey positions if they're not careful.
Yeah. I mean, does that happen? Is that something where you'll have nightmares about it and you know it's wrong, and then just you'll wake up one morning and be like, I know how to fix this, or is that through lots of just grinding it out and play testing?
It's in this case it was quite a grind. There.
Right.
There was there was just endless games, just with the kind of functional mechanics working quite nicely. I had them worked out, but it was that balance of the sentries moving around, and there was just loads of games where the sentries just even just an average roll was spotting the attackers too soon, and it's just finding that right balance between those things.
Yeah.
In this case it was just a grind of trying different tweak after tweak after tweak.
Are there anywhere like it's been the opposite of that and you've just felt like a genius because you've just been like, I know how to fix this, like you've been presented with an issue and then...
the kind of the eureka moments, I guess, I wouldn't put it in that way, but I tend to work out the dice mechanic very early on. That was one of the first things that in my list of ideas, I'll scribble out some dice faces in my notebook. And just that basic idea of, in fact, very early on, it was literally, well, the further you run, the more dice you would roll, so the more chance you have of rolling that alert and giving yourself away. So very early on, I kind of almost had the crazy idea that you should literally be able to roll however many dice you want on any action, which has gone away, but that kind of core idea has remained right from the beginning.
Right.
And it kind of creates its own little problems, whereas in a lot of games you do something better, you can just roll more dice. But with this mechanic, that would mean you're worse at staying quiet.
Yes.
So I've had to come up with workarounds for all of that. So the better you are at something, you're not rolling more dice for it, you're just more likely to get a success on the dice you are rolling.
Okay. And is that where the chevrons come in?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it depends on your stat.
Okay.
The better your stat, the more of those chevrons will count as successes.
Right. Well, that's quite simple then. And do they? So again, it's more layers within that dice system, right? Because you've also got, I'm assuming if it's opposed dice rolls, the chevrons are like you're trying to out chevron your opponent.
Yes. Yeah. Essentially, that really only comes up in close combat, which obviously in a World War II game isn't that common, but definitely comes up. So yeah, you'll get so many successes on your attack roll, and then the defender will be trying to roll successes to negate your hits, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, I've dug into the mechanics without actually asking you the basics, which is like how many models to a side and things like that. So do you want to give us kind of the broader overview,
the broad
I
picture,
guess?
Yeah. In the wrong order. Yeah, it's probably similar to Test of Honor. Again, we're maybe 10 to 20 models on a side, even potentially less if you want a really elite team of SAS, maybe 5 guys going in, and 10 to 20 defenders, some of who will be maybe in reserve, they're still asleep. So that's the kind of size of the game. I've still been doing it on a 3x3 table, so the terrain is quite dense, lots of places to sneak around and hide the bodies once you've taken down those.
I'm worried about how obsessed with hiding bodies you seem to be. I think that's 3 or 4 times today you mentioned that to me.
Well, it's just I've had lots of fun sculpting some kind of soldiers like this lying on the ground.
Are there other things like I think you've got like classics of like throwing a rock to distract someone, or trying to deal with guard dogs before you deal with the sentries and stuff. Have you worked that kind of stuff in?
A lot of that will be with cards you can play.
Right.
So there'll be a whole card system layered over the top of what I've described so far. So the attackers will have orders which will most commonly allow them to do 2 actions in a row, or allow two of your models to have an action each at the same time, and they'll then be kind of more crazy stuff, like, as you say, throwing a rock, putting down some sausages to distract the dog.
You've got the sausages, that's important.
And then the defenders are going to have event cards, I'm calling them at the moment. So they'll have kind of cunning things they can do, like maybe change the direction that the guards are patrolling, or make them suddenly go faster, or things like that. But there'll also be lots of random occurrences that, for the purposes of a fun game, the defender will have control of, or be able to decide exactly when those get played. So there might be suddenly the moon comes out from behind a cloud, and bathed in moonlight, and the defender gets to play that card.
Right.
Or the static on the radio, or suddenly your gun jams. Because there's a risk with the defender being quite limited for half the game, that it's not much fun for that player.
Sure.
So I wanted them to have this extra kind of quite fun, characterful thing they're going to be doing all the way through, and potentially, save some of those cards just to play at a really annoying time.
Yeah.
Or to really boost their chances when finally the alarm goes off and they get to suddenly use all their men.
No, that sounds, I mean, it might be that I've just been doing a lot with 7TV fantasy, but that really sounds like this kind of cinematic combat level, almost like the defender becomes like the director of the action, and is like, makes that movie moment happen kind of thing. And it sounds like you're obviously always quite inspired. When I've talked to you about Test of Honor, you're as inspired by samurai films as you are by the history, and it sounds like the same here. Does that mean you've got like very focused ideas for where this will go eventually, or is that too far ahead now to think about?
Yeah, I haven't particularly worked out a long-term plan for this.
No.
I think you could fairly happily use it in different theatres. You could do Chindits versus Japanese in the middle of the jungle. You could have SAS creeping into bases in Africa, blowing up planes, things like that. So it works around with lots of different models. So there's a potential for new cards and new ranges to go with all those different things. Initially, we're starting in Europe. And that kind of mid-war commando raids into occupied France kind of idea, because that's just the classic cinema thing in my head. But I think there's lots of potential for following on down the line with other things as well.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, you're still obviously, you kind of past the gestation period, it's infancy now. How long has it taken to get to this point, and how long do you think you've got left to go, and what's left to sort out for you?
It's probably been going about a year. It's probably a fairly quick turnaround for a game, I guess. I've been probably working seriously on it for about 9 months, I guess.
Right.
And there's a good few months to go yet. The core rules are pretty solid. They're out in the world being play tested. Obviously, lockdowns has made that a lot harder. So that's limited who I can play with massively. But there's still scenarios to write. The cards are still to be finalised, things like that. And then all the layout and design work is kind of started to do bits of that, but that's all to come as well. But it's interesting that whole lockdown issue has changed my process in a way, because it's led me to put the rules out into the world through the Facebook group far earlier than I would normally do. My instinct, being a bit of a control freak, is always just to not show anyone until I think it's perfect, and I've had to overcome that feeling, and open it up, and it's been really useful. So even just down to just simple things, like I initially had the noisy dice as black dice, and the quiet dice as white dice, and someone on the group, in fact a few people on the group, said, wouldn't it be more obvious for the stealthy one to be the dark one?
Yeah, sort of staying in the dark.
And he was like, oh yeah, done, thank you.
Yeah.
Great tip. And so there's lots of kind of little helpful little comments and ideas that have come through that, and that's proving to be a really useful new process for me, having that kind of widespread help coming in.
Do you have a kind of, are you already locked in on what figures will be included, what profiles and characters, and what sort of scenario vibe you want to bring to the game? Obviously you mentioned the particular time period within the war and the theatre, but...
Yeah, so the commandos started to be, virtually invented. Churchill decided he wanted some, I think he called them hunter class warriors to go and raid the coast. So the commando units started to be used, and they were being parachuted into Italy, and there's a great story when they parachuted onto the coast of France and literally dismantled a radar dish under fire, dragged it off and took it out on some boats, because Britain needed that radar tech. So those are the kind of bits of the war, and then it could happily kind of go into the later stages of the war, because there's always kind of opportunities and stories for little sneaky actions. So in terms of actual models, we're going to have some sentries in the box and some probably British attackers. And we're, for the first time, I'm going to have some plastics.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Which is very cool. We're working in partnership with Wargames Atlantic. So they've been very helpful and helped this happen. So there'll be a core of plastics, and then there'll be metal characters to go on top of that. So we're doing lots of fun German characters and British spies and SAS and commandos and all this kind of stuff.
Nice. Any French resistance?
Yes, there definitely
Good.
will be.
That's what I'm into at the moment.
Right,
so
right. Yes, lots of cool ideas for that as well.
Nice.
So yes, again, we're going to hopefully have access to some stuff from Wargames Atlantic again, and I'll be adding in lots of cool characters in metals and people, civilians, but are they hiding a
Right.
gun and all sorts of cool stuff like that.
It sounds like you've got a lot of scope and there's lots of fun things you can create. For me, like, it feels important that once you've taken someone out, you can distract the dogs with maybe a sentry that you've taken out. Have you got things like that? Or maybe you could cover a body in sausages and have the dogs do the work
if
for
you've
you.
got sausages, I don't think you need to put them on the body. That seems just gratuitous to me.
Well, maybe that's how I play, but no, sorry, I'm just being slightly crazy now. What else do we need to talk about? This is my random aside. I guess, like, you've not done a full boxed game with plastic bits before, so does that bring new challenges? And there's some frames in there's going to be dice and counters, I assume, in the rule book. Will everyone need that to play, or is there still going to be just a separate standalone book that you can also get?
I think this time it will be just that core set. It's not like a Games Workshop set with hundreds of models in. I would imagine it's going to be around 20 models, something like that, I would think. But you're going to need the special dice, you're going to need the cards, so just a rule book on its own wouldn't be any use anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll definitely be a full set. So yeah, there's kind of technical logistics in terms of packaging and stuff like that to sort out. But.
Awesome. Is there anything I haven't asked you, a glaring thing that I've missed that you want to tell everyone about?
I think we're good.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for telling us all about it. It sounds really cool, and sounds like quite a new way to play, which is really exciting always. So we'll look forward to seeing more in the future.
Excellent. Great.
This video has been brought to you by WI Prime, Wargames Illustrated magazine's online members club. View more videos or find out more about WI Prime by following these links.